On Mother's Day, my millionaire son asked, "Mom, is my wife still giving you $10,000 monthly? I want to make sure you're comfortable." I froze. $10,000. For 8 months, I'd survived on church donations. I whispered, "Son, the church keeps me alive." His smile died. Then she walked in. Diamonds. Silk. That cold smile. She didn't know this was the day her lies would shatter forever. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another step in this journey toward truth. And if this story has already touched your heart, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further to those who need to hear it. My name is Rosemary Whitmore. Though most people call me Rose, I'm a 69-year-old widow living alone in a small house in Maryvale on the west side of Phoenix, Arizona. This house used to be filled with laughter, the place where my husband Theodore and I raised our only son, Julian. After Theo passed away from a heart attack 12 years ago, I learned to slow down, tending my desert garden, cooking, and occasionally helping with Bible study classes at Sonoran Grace Church down the street. I didn't have much, but it was enough, until old age came knocking and everything grew more expensive with each passing day. The air conditioner that only worked when it felt like it. The refrigerator that hummed like a dying engine. The medications I started skipping because food seemed more important. Julian, the boy I once carried in my arms, is now a millionaire at 40. He owns Whitmore Digital Ventures, a tech consulting firm with offices in Scottsdale. He drives a brand new Tesla and lives in a mansion in Paradise Valley, where the annual property tax alone equals what I've earned in my entire life. I was proud of him, of course. I raised him with these hands, believing he would grow into a good, kind, and grateful man. So when he walked into my house that Mother's Day afternoon, sunlight spilling across his tired but handsome face, my heart warmed until he spoke. "Mom, is my wife still giving you $10,000 every month?" It felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. My heart pounded against my ribs, and my fingers clenched the corner of my old apron. I tried to smile, but my lips were dry as the Arizona desert in July. 10,000, I repeated, my voice catching. "Son, the church is helping me survive." Julian's eyes widened, his smile dissolving like sugar in water. He glanced toward the woman who had just entered, Celeste, his wife. She stood in the doorway wearing a pearl-colored silk dress and shimmering diamond earrings. The scent of Dior perfume filled my small living room, overpowering the smell of the apple crisp I had just baked to welcome my son. Celeste smiled lightly, a smile that could melt a room if it weren't so cold. "Oh, Mother Rose, you must have forgotten," she said sweetly, her voice like honey over ice. "I stop by every month to bring the money. Remember?" She tilted her head, studying me with those calculating eyes. "You know, at your age, memory isn't what it used to be." The words were soft as feathers, but they landed on my heart like stones. At your age, old age. I'd heard that phrase too many times since Theodore died, from people who thought an old widow was nothing but a fading memory, someone whose words couldn't be trusted, whose experiences didn't matter, but I knew my memory. I'd been an accountant for 3 different companies over 30 years. I'd managed thousands of dollars without losing a cent. I remembered every bill, every prayer, every face at church who'd helped me through these difficult months, and I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that Celeste had never given me a single penny. I looked at her calmly, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. "If you did bring it, then it must have gotten lost somewhere," I said, barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the wedding gift Theodore had given me 40 years ago. I could hear the hum of cars outside on 51st Avenue and the pounding of my own heart. Julian looked between us, between the gray-haired mother in her apron and the glamorous wife in her designer dress. His brow furrowed. "Celeste, you have been bringing the money, right? I transfer it to you every month." Celeste tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "Of course, darling. I come here every month. Maybe Mother just forgot." She reached out as if to pat my hand, but I pulled away. "It happens to everyone eventually." I nodded slightly, choosing silence. Some battles aren't meant to be fought right away. They're meant to be observed. That's what Theodore used to tell me when I struggled with difficult clients. "Rose, if someone underestimates you, don't shout. Let them hear the sound of the truth instead." Julian stood, walked over, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, it's probably just a misunderstanding. I'll check the accounts. I just want you to live comfortably, without worry." I smiled faintly, but something inside me had awakened, a quiet storm of suspicion and resolve. I said nothing more, just cleared the table and placed a glass of orange juice in front of him. As Julian sat down, Celeste moved gracefully to his side, resting a possessive hand on his shoulder. Her gaze swept over me, cool, dismissive, the look of someone who believes money can buy integrity. The air in the room turned cold. Even though the Arizona sun outside was blazing, a chill ran down my spine. After they left, I sat alone in my living room. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, spreading across the old wooden table. $10,000 a month. 8 months. $80,000. That money could have fixed the leaking roof, replaced my broken refrigerator, helped me live out my final years in comfort. Instead, I'd been counting canned soup from the church pantry and thanking God for every loaf of donated bread. I pressed a hand to my chest, not out of anger, but from the ache that rose inside me, a silent, bone-deep ache. That night, I opened my old notebook, the brown leather one Julian had given me for my 60th birthday, the one where I used to jot down grocery lists and prayers. But this time, I wrote something different. Find the truth, and beneath it, don't trust fake tears. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The desert wind rattled my windows, carrying the scent of creosote and dust. I wasn't weak. I'd survived loss, loneliness, and struggle. And I would survive this, too. Julian might have been fooled, but I hadn't. And if Celeste thought I'd sit quietly while she played the perfect daughter-in-law, she had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. I spent the rest of that afternoon in my small kitchen, sunlight cutting through the curtains into long golden lines across the linoleum floor. The chamomile tea on the table had gone cold, but I stayed seated, staring at my old flip phone, asking myself, could I be wrong? Maybe the bank made a mistake. Maybe Celeste sent the money by mail and it got lost. Or maybe, in a rare moment of confusion, I had simply forgotten. No, I knew every detail, every small gift I had ever received. There had been no letter, no envelope, no money from Julian. That evening, I pulled out my old accounting ledger, the one I kept from my years as treasurer at the church women's committee. I flipped through the pages, each line precise. $12 for blood pressure medicine, $24 for utilities, $10 for community dinners at Sonoran Grace, every expense recorded neatly in my careful handwriting. No mention of any transfer from Julian Whitmore. Nothing. The next morning, I took the bus to Copper State Community Bank, where I still kept a small savings account. The air conditioning inside felt like heaven after the 100-degree heat outside. I sat across from a young teller named Jade and handed her my passbook. Please check if there have been any transfers from Julian Whitmore. He says he's been sending me $10,000 each month for the past 8 months. Jade looked surprised, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Then she shook her head gently. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. There's nothing. The only activity was a $1.35 interest payment back in March. I nodded, thanked her, and stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk steadily toward the exit. Outside, the Phoenix morning heat hit me like a wall. I stood on the sidewalk, the sun beating down on my gray hair, feeling as if a stone had fallen straight through my chest. No transfers, no envelopes, no letters, nothing. For 8 months. I had clipped coupons from the Arizona Republic, bought dented cans of soup from the discount bin, and quietly thanked God every time the church delivered food. I was used to eating alone, counting change before heading to the store, wearing the same 3 dresses because I couldn't afford new ones. But never, not once, had I imagined that behind my son's silence was a lie. I went home, set my purse down, and sat motionless at my kitchen table. The ticking of the wall clock filled the house. Each slow-moving minute hand seemed to whisper, "The truth is coming." That afternoon, I walked to Sonoran Grace Church. The adobe walls glowed warm in the sunlight, and inside it was cool and quiet. Pastor Ezra Blackwood, who'd known me for over 20 years, saw me sitting in the last pew after the service. He walked over, his weathered face kind. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you all right? You look troubled today." I smiled faintly, hiding my trembling hands in my lap. "I'm just trying to understand why my son's money never arrived." "Pastor." He sat down beside me, his voice gentle. "The Lord has a way of bringing truth to light. Rose, don't lose faith." I nodded, but inside, faith wasn't enough anymore. I needed action. As I was about to leave, a young woman approached. She had warm brown eyes and wore a simple volunteer badge. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Lucia Blackwood, Pastor Ezra's niece. I work in social services." She hesitated, then continued softly. "I've noticed you've been coming for food assistance more often. If something's wrong, if someone in your family is taking advantage of you, there are ways to protect yourself." Her words hit me like lightning. She knew. Somehow, this young woman had seen what I'd been trying to hide. "Lucia," I said quietly, "what would you do if you suspected someone was stealing from you, but you had no proof?" She sat down beside me. "I document everything, every conversation, every promise, every lie. Write it all down with dates and times, because when you're ready to act, you'll need evidence, not just suspicion." That night, I opened the brown leather notebook again. This time, I didn't just write a vow. I started a record, a journal of truth. I also did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the small wooden box I kept in my bedroom closet, Theodore's memory box. Inside were his wedding ring, the first love letter he ever wrote me, our wedding photo, and a note he'd left on my pillow the morning before he died. "Rose, my love." It read in his careful handwriting. "If I'm not here tomorrow, remember this. You are stronger than you think. Don't let anyone, not even our son, make you forget your worth." I held the note, tears streaming down my face. "Theo," I whispered. I almost let them. I almost believed I was nothing without their approval. I carefully placed the note back in the box, but I kept it open on my nightstand. A reminder, a promise. From that day forward, I began documenting everything. Every time Celeste visited, I noted the date, time, and her exact words. Thursday, June 14th. Celeste stopped by with a cake, said, "The money's been sent. Maybe the bank's delayed." No envelope, no proof. Saturday, July 12th. Called. Said she couldn't come because of a charity meeting. I heard restaurant music in the background. Line by line, I recorded it all. No anger, no hatred. Just the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime balancing numbers, knowing they never lie. The weeks that followed, Celeste kept visiting, always flawless, designer dresses, expensive handbags, sparkling heels. Each time she brought a small gift, flowers, gourmet cookies, sometimes scented candles, but never an envelope, never cash, never proof. One afternoon in August, while I was watering my saguaro cactus in the front yard, a white Porsche Cayenne pulled into the driveway. The vehicle gleamed under the brutal Arizona sun, so bright I had to squint. Celeste stepped out, radiant as ever, holding a bunch of desert marigolds. "Mother Rose, I brought you some flowers to brighten your day," she said sweetly. "Stress isn't good for the memory, you know." I set the watering can down and wiped my hands on my gardening gloves. "My memory is just fine. Celeste, fine enough to remember that the last time you brought me money was never—" Her face twitched, just for a split second. But she quickly recovered with a bright smile. "Oh, Mother, you must be mistaken. I've been sending it. Your bank must be at fault." I smiled and began arranging the flowers in an old vase. "Maybe, but I already asked the bank. They said nothing's come through for 8 months. Silence. Even the sparrows on the fence seemed to stop chirping." Celeste fidgeted with her diamond necklace, the one I'd never seen before. "I'll double check," she said quickly, then hurried back to her Porsche, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and lies. I stood there watching the car disappear down the street, a mix of bitterness and clarity filling my chest. She had lied, and now she knew that I knew. That evening, I wrote in my notebook, August 22nd, Celeste came alone, brought flowers, claimed she'd sent the money. New Porsche Cayenne, no proof, voice unsteady. Left early. The next afternoon, I walked to the post office on Indian School Road where the public phone still worked. I didn't want a call from home, not when I suspected Celeste might be watching. I dialed the number for Whitmore Digital Ventures and spoke politely, keeping my voice steady. "Hello, this is Rosemary Whitmore, Julian Whitmore's mother. I'd like to speak with someone in accounting. It's a personal matter." After a short hold, a middle-aged woman answered. "This is Iris Callahan, head accountant. Mrs. Whitmore, how can I help you?" I gripped the receiver tightly. "Thank you, Iris. I just need to confirm something. My son said his company has been deducting $10,000 each month from his personal account to send to me. I'd like to know if that's correct." There was a pause. Then Iris spoke, her tone hesitant. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can't disclose personal financial details, but let me check." Another pause. "Yes, I do recall seeing automated transfers on the same day every month for that exact amount. It does appear the money was sent, but I'm not certain to whom." To whom I repeated, "It wasn't sent to me." "I'm not certain. Mrs. Whitmore, the recipient's name matches yours, but the account number is different. I assumed it was yours." A chill ran down my spine despite the 100-degree heat outside the phone booth. I forced myself to speak evenly. "Thank you, Iris. That's all I needed for now." I hung up and stood motionless, my heart racing but my mind clear as glass. There it was, the truth. Someone had created a fake account under my name, and only one person was close enough to pull that off, Celeste. On the walk home, my shadow stretched long across the hot pavement. The wind carried the scent of scorched creosote and dust, that smell unique to Arizona summers. I thought of Theodore's words. If you want to know who's honest, look at their hands. Honest hands always show the marks of work. I thought of Celeste's hands, long manicured fingers, diamond rings, designer handbags, not a single callus, not a trace of real labor. The next morning, while I was trimming dead leaves from my prickly pear cactus, a firm knock echoed at the door. Not the soft tap of a mail carrier or neighbor. This was steady, deliberate. I wiped my hands and went to open it. Standing on my porch was a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked slightly rumpled from the heat. He smiled politely and gave a small nod. "Mrs. Rosemary Whitmore, I'm Nathaniel Garrison. Most people call me Nate. I'm the chief accountant at your son's company, Whitmore Digital Ventures." I narrowed my eyes slightly. "You're Nathaniel. I only know Iris, the accountant I spoke to on the phone." He nodded. "Yes, Iris is my assistant. She told me about your call yesterday, and I thought perhaps you should know a few things." His voice was calm but serious, tinged with regret. I invited him inside and poured a glass of ice water. Morning light streamed through the window, catching the lines on his face. The look of a man who'd seen more than he wished to. He set his leather briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside was a thick folder, neatly organized. I saw printed text, rows of numbers, the familiar language of accounting. My world for 30 years before retirement. He slid the folder toward me and spoke slowly. "These are copies of 8 transfers, each for $10,000. 80,000 total. Recipient. An account under the name Celeste Whitmore." It felt like a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. My hands shook as I flipped through each page. The papers were clear. Sender, Julian Whitmore. Recipient, Celeste Whitmore. Verified by the bank. Same date every month, the 15th. Steady as clockwork for 8 months. I looked up, my voice hoarse. "Mr. Garrison, who opened that account?" He sighed, removed his glasses, and wiped them with a handkerchief. "Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Whitmore. Every document for the sub-account bears her signature and a signed authorization from Julian." I froze. "Authorization? You mean Julian gave her permission to use my name?" He nodded slowly. "Most likely he didn't read the forms carefully. She presented an identification copy of you, which I suspect was forged. Very sophisticated. The system automatically registered it as your account. Even though the recipient was her," I pressed a hand to my forehead, the room spinning slightly. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. For 8 months, Celeste had used my name, a mother's name, to siphon money from my own son. "And Julian?" I asked quietly. "Does he know?" Nate hesitated. "Honestly, I don't think so. Julian's a hard-working man, but he trusts people too easily. He lets Celeste handle most of the paperwork." He paused and looked up at me. "She's also been using the company credit card for personal expenses." I stared at him. "The company card?" "Yes, the corporate card of Whitmore Digital Ventures. It's supposed to be for client entertainment and business expenses, but recently we found irregular charges. Spa visits in Scottsdale, jewelry, clothing, even first-class flights to New York, over $15,000 in just 3 months. I sat in silence. The words spa, jewelry, flights echoed in my head like hammers striking metal. I remembered Celeste's voice that day in my garden. "Mother, Julian's so busy. I handle everything for him." Now I knew what everything meant. Every dollar. "Mr. Garrison," I said, my voice raspy but firm, "if I want to expose this, will you help me?" He met my gaze, his gray-blue eyes steady. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe in justice, but I also believe in evidence. We need to prepare carefully. Otherwise, she'll twist the narrative and turn Julian against you. Celeste is not an easy opponent." "I know," I said. "I've seen her do it before, smiling while she lies." Nate gave a faint, grim smile. "I'll help, but give me time to gather everything. Transaction histories, related documents, written confirmation from the bank that the account isn't yours. It'll take a few days, but I promise we'll have the truth." That afternoon, I called my old college friend, Vivian Sterling. We'd lost touch over the years, but I'd heard she'd become a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. When she answered, her voice was exactly as I remembered it, sharp and confident. Rose Whitmore. My God, it's been 20 years. What's going on? I told her everything. The fake account, the $80,000, Celeste's lies. When I finished, there was a long silence. Rose, Viv finally said, her voice hard as steel. What you're describing is elder financial exploitation. It's a federal crime. We can fight this. 3 days later, with every fact lined up in my head as neatly as rows on a balance sheet, I decided to act, but not in court. Not yet. First, Julian needed to see the truth with his own eyes. I called him, Julian, honey. I'm thinking of inviting you both to dinner this Sunday. It's been a while since we've had a proper meal together. Julian agreed happily, never noticing the thin wire hidden in that invitation. I spent all Sunday morning preparing honey roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, apple walnut salad, and apple crisp, Julian's childhood favorites. I polished Theodore's old silverware and set the dining table with soft candlelight. Everything arranged carefully, warm, sincere. Just enough to make a liar let down her guard. When the clock struck 6, I heard the familiar purr of an expensive engine. Through the window, I saw the Porsche slide into my driveway. Celeste stepped out first, flawless as always, wearing a jade silk dress and new heels. Julian followed with a bouquet of white lilies. Mom, you look wonderful. Julian grinned, placing the flowers on the table. Son, I'm better than ever, thanks to God's grace. And the two of you, Celeste smiled, her lips curled in that usual smug way. I recognized that look, the look of someone convinced she holds every string. I poured wine and tea, chatted about the weather, my cactus garden, the new family that moved in down the street. Everything flowed as if no shadow of doubt had ever passed through this house. I let the room warm up, let her relax. When the main course was served, I looked up and smiled. I truly appreciate you both, especially for this month's $10,000. Celeste paused, just a fraction of a second. Then she flashed a bright smile and sipped her wine. Oh, Mother, please don't be so formal. I'm just doing what I should. I nodded, pretending to be shy. I'm so grateful. I finally fixed the air conditioner. Phoenix heat is unbearable without it, and thanks to that money, I feel so much more comfortable. Celeste's smile widened, smug and satisfied. She tilted her head toward Julian as if to say, see, everything's fine. I watched her slowly, then asked in an offhand way, like it was nothing at all. Oh, Celeste, I'm just curious. What day do you usually send it? She didn't brace herself. She answered instantly, like a reflex. The 10th of every month. Mother. I nodded lightly. But before I could say more, Julian spoke, a bit puzzled. Wait, not the 10th, honey. I set the auto transfer for the 15th. The room went silent. Do you hear that silence? The moment a liar steps right into her own trap. If it were you facing someone who deceived you like this, would you stay quiet like I did, or call it out on the spot? Tell me in the comments. I think most of us have lived through a shattered dinner like that at least once. The faint clink of a knife on a plate sounded harsh in the stillness. They stared at each other. Celeste forced a smile and blinked a few times. Really? She said with a strained laugh. I thought you said the 10th. Julian frowned deeper. No, I'm sure it's the 15th. I picked that day because that's when payroll hits. Do you hear that silence? The moment a liar steps right into her own trap. If it were you facing someone who deceived you like this, would you stay quiet like I did, or call it out on the spot? Tell me in the comments. I think most of us have lived through a shattered dinner like that at least once. The room sank into cold stillness. I smiled gently and set my fork down. Oh, wonderful. I'll go to the bank on the 15th to check, just to make sure the system isn't having issues. Celeste gave a brittle laugh, trying to hide her unease. Oh, Mother, you're so careful. Don't worry, I've been sending it regularly. Julian nodded, but his eyes had shifted. He turned to his wife, about to say something, but she quickly changed the subject to work and the weather. I sat quietly, watching them both. Inside me was a clean, perfect calm. The calm of someone who knows she's set the exact right trap. 2 days later, I organized what I told Julian was a small charity gathering at my house. Pastor Ezra agreed to help, bringing official-looking envelopes from the church. When Julian and Celeste arrived that evening, I had everything prepared. The beige envelope sat in the center of my dining table like an invisible guest waiting to be acknowledged. "Son," I said slowly, once everyone was seated, "this is the documentation of all the assistance I've received over the past 8 months. I think you should take a look." Julian frowned. "Assistance, Mom. I've been sending you the transfers every month." I slid the bank statement toward him. The bold print was unmistakable. Recipient, Celeste Whitmore. Amount, $10,000. Date, 15th of each month. Julian went silent. His eyes dropped to the page, widening from confusion to shock. Celeste jumped in, her voice sweet but pitched high. "Oh, that must be some mix-up. Mother, you've been getting the money. Right banks make mistakes with recipient names all the time." I kept my voice calm. "Is that so? Then how about this spa bill in Scottsdale? $1,800 charged to the secondary card under your name. Was that the bank's mistake too?" Her face stiffened, but she forced a laugh. "Oh dear, and maybe someone used my name by accident." Before she could finish, a deep male voice came from the doorway. "No, Mrs. Whitmore. No one used your name by accident. I'm the one who prepared those records." Everyone turned. Nate Garrison stood at the threshold, holding more printed pages. I had asked him to come, but hadn't told anyone else. Celeste's face went pale. Julian looked at him, confused. "Who are you?" "I'm Nathaniel Garrison," he said firmly. "Chief accountant at your firm, and the one your mother authorized to investigate the transfers made under her name." The air froze. I rose, facing Celeste. "Nate can verify every amount, every signature, every transaction, 8 transfers, 10,000 each. Not once did they reach me." Julian turned to his wife, his voice breaking. "Celeste, what is this?" She grabbed his hand, tears welling up. I just borrowed it, that's all. I was going to pay it back. I didn't want to upset your mother." I sighed softly. 8 months of borrowing. By forging bank papers under your mother-in-law's name. Celeste sobbed harder, but her tears didn't carry guilt, only desperation. Julian pulled his hand away, his eyes burning. "What did you do to my mother?" he shouted, his voice shaking with fury. "I sent that money so she could live comfortably. You used it for cars, spas, vacations, and lied to my face." Celeste stepped back, her face drained of color. "You don't understand. Enough!" David slammed his palm on the table. The glasses rattled sharply. The room fell silent. Only Celeste's ragged breathing and my pounding heartbeat filled the air. Pastor Ezra, who had sat quietly the whole time, folded his hands and spoke in a low, steady tone. Sometimes God doesn't need to punish the guilty. He just lets them see their true reflection. Celeste burst into sobs, glancing wildly around for an escape. "I can't take this anymore," she screamed, then suddenly stood. "I don't need anyone's pity." She snatched her purse and stormed out, her heels striking the wooden floor. Each step sounded like the end of something. Julian didn't stop her. He just sat, head bowed. The door slammed shut. Silence fell. 3 weeks later, I received the official notice. Maricopa County Superior Court. Case number 23-CF-982. Rosemary Whitmore, plaintiff, versus Celeste Whitmore. Defendant, elder financial exploitation and family fraud. The morning of the hearing. The sky was gray, unusual for Phoenix. I arrived early with Viv. The courthouse hallway was long, tiled in glossy white, smelling faintly of coffee and tension. When we entered the courtroom, Celeste was already there, wearing a black suit, her face pale. Beside her sat a young lawyer, nervous, likely hired last minute. Julian sat behind them, alone and silent. The judge struck the gavel. The court is now in session. Viv stood first, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, for 8 consecutive months, the defendant used a fraudulent bank account under her mother-in-law's name to misappropriate a total of $80,000. Celeste's lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, my client maintains this was merely a misunderstanding. Mrs. Whitmore is elderly and may have misremembered. I felt my blood boil. But then Viv stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore's memory is sharp enough to document in detail every single day the defendant visited. She pulled out my brown leather notebook. In this journal, Mrs. Whitmore recorded 8 full months of visits, dates, times, and the defendant's exact words. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dr. Serafina Nguyen, my physician, testified next. I've been Mrs. Whitmore's doctor for 15 years. Her cognitive function is excellent, better than many 40-year-olds I treat. Age does not equal incompetence. When it was my turn to testify, I stood and walked to the witness stand. I looked at the judge and spoke clearly. What I got from them was not love, Your Honor. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. The judge retired to deliberate. 2 hours later, he returned. After reviewing all evidence, the court rules the defendant, Mrs. Celeste Whitmore, shall repay the full $80,000 to Mrs. Rosemary Whitmore. The defendant is hereby stripped of access to her husband's financial accounts for 5 years. The gavel struck 3 times, dry and cold, like the sound of a steel door closing. Celeste sank into her chair. I saw her trying to keep her composure, but tears began spilling down her cheeks. She turned to Julian, her voice trembling. You have to believe me. I didn't mean to. Julian said nothing. He just looked at her with empty eyes, then turned away. The sight made my heart crack open. I didn't feel joy or triumph, only a dull ache. Because to reclaim justice, I had to watch my son lose his marriage. I had once dreamed that Julian would be happy someday with someone who loved and cared for him. Now that dream had vanished, buried somewhere between the pages of a court file. Viv placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice gentle. You did the right thing, Rose. You didn't just protect yourself. You saved your son. I nodded, but my lips couldn't form a smile. Justice, I realized, is a double-edged sword. It cuts through the chains of deceit, but also severs the fragile threads of family. When I left the courthouse, the sky had already turned dark gray. Rain began to fall, one of those rare desert storms that come without warning. Heavy drops splashed onto the stone steps, breaking apart into hundreds of smaller ones. I stood under the awning, looking up. The rain was cold against my skin, yet somehow I felt lighter inside. There was no applause, no cheers, no sense of victory, only the quiet peace of someone who had walked the full circle of justice. I whispered softly, as if speaking to the rain itself. Julian, I don't know if you can forgive me, but at least I've held on to the one thing I could never afford to lose. The truth. The rain kept falling as I walked away, step by step, leaving behind the courthouse, a place where justice had prevailed but a mother's heart had quietly fractured. After the trial, my house returned to an eerie stillness. No more unexpected knocks, no more hurried phone calls. Only the ticking of the wall clock and sunlight slipping through the curtains. lighting up tiny specks of dust floating in the air. Months passed. Julian didn't call. No messages, no emails, no, "How are you, Mom?" I didn't blame him. I understood he was trying to clean up the wreckage of his marriage. Still, on quiet nights when moonlight crossed the window pane, I often found myself holding the phone, staring at the name Julian Whitmore in my contacts, never pressing call, just looking, then setting it down. Being a mother, I learned, sometimes means knowing when silence is the only way to let your child grow. The restitution payment arrived one morning in June, $80,000, a sum I hadn't seen in 8 long months. I opened the email from the bank and read the words, "Deposit completed successfully." I thought I'd feel joy, but instead, I felt hollow. I sat in front of the computer for a long while. Then a thought came. If that money had once been a tool of deceit, then now it had to become something good. I used a small portion to repair the roof, replace the broken refrigerator, and finally buy a proper air conditioner. As for the rest, I reached out to Pastor Ezra and Viv. "I want to start a foundation," I said as we sat in the church office. "I'll call it Silver Sunrise Foundation. I want to help elderly people who've been financially exploited by their own children or family, just like I was." Pastor Ezra looked at me for a long moment, then smiled gently behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Rose, this isn't just kindness. This is how God turns pain into the seed of something good." Viv, ever practical, flipped open her notebook and began writing. "We'll register it as a nonprofit. I'll handle the legal side. Pastor Ezra can represent the community. And you'll be the founder." I chuckled softly. "I don't want to be the founder, Viv. I'm just a mother who learned how to stand up again." 3 months later, Silver Sunrise Foundation officially opened. Our first office was in the basement of Sonoran Grace Church. Just 3 desks, an old printer, and a wooden sign carved with the words, "Helping the Forgotten Find Their Voice Again." Then one night, rain poured steadily from dusk till midnight, one of those rare monsoon storms that turn Phoenix streets into rivers. Wind lashed against the windows. I was sitting by the window, reviewing donation files, when I heard a knock, soft but insistent, carrying the chill of the storm. It was past 10 at night. At my age, few people knock that late. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I turned the latch. The door swung open, wind rushed in, rain splattering onto my floor, and there, under the downpour, stood Julian. He was drenched, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes red and weary. In that instant, time froze. The boy I once held in my arms, the one I taught to tie his shoelaces, now stood before me trembling like a lost child. "Mom," his voice cracked, "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been so stupid." Before I could respond, he stepped inside and sank to his knees on the wet floor. A broken sob escaped him, raw and unguarded. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I just stood there, looking at my son. The man who once thought he understood everything, now crumbling in the very house where he was raised to value honesty. I knelt beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "Julian, get up, son. Everyone stumbles. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's saving yourself." He lifted his head, tears mixing with rain streaming down his face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I doubted you. Let her manipulate me. Stayed silent while you suffered. Mom, I lost everything." I shook my head gently, guiding him to the sofa, drying his hair with a towel as I used to when he was little. "I don't need your apology," I said quietly. "I just need you to remember. Truth never arrives late. It only waits until we're brave enough to face it." After a long pause, Julian whispered, "Celeste's gone. Mom, She drained the savings account, took what was left from the company, and disappeared. They say she ran off with someone she knew before we were married. I closed my eyes. No anger, no surprise, just a quiet sadness settling in. I tried calling, texting, looking everywhere. Julian continued, his voice trembling. She vanished. She only left one message. You trusted the wrong person. I took his hand, warm and firm. No, son, you just realize the truth too late. But even when trust is broken, it's still what separates us from those who deceive. He rested his head on my shoulder like a child who had finally found his way home. I lost everything. Mom, my career, my money, my dignity. I stroked his hair, my voice calm. No, my son. What you found tonight is far greater. The heart that knows how to admit its mistakes. We talked until almost midnight. I brewed him ginger tea while he sat by the window, watching the rain. Mom, he said suddenly, can I help with your foundation? I want to do something meaningful. Maybe start this weekend. I looked at him. His eyes were sincere, so much that I had to fight the swell of emotion rising in my chest. Are you sure, son? Of course. Mom, I don't want to live the way I used to anymore. I want to relearn how to use money to heal instead of to hurt. From that day on, Julian came to help at Silver Sunrise Foundation every weekend. He drove in early, bringing coffee for everyone, then sat with me organizing files and writing thank you letters to donors. Some days he helped Pastor Ezra move chairs. Other days he went with Viv to meet elderly victims and record their stories. People say time heals everything, but for me, it wasn't time. It was my son's transformation that became the real medicine. One autumn morning, I sat at my desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. The breeze carried the faint scent of creosote from the desert. I picked up my pen and wrote, Celeste, thank you. Because of you, I learned the true value of honesty and the strength of self-respect. I paused. Strangely, there was no anger in me, only quiet peace. You took my money, but in return, you gave me something money could never buy. Freedom. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in Theodore's memory box, next to his wedding ring and the note he'd left me. A sound like a chapter gently closing. A year later, I received a call from the Arizona Council on Aging. Mrs. Whitmore, congratulations. You've been selected as Arizona Woman of the Year. We honor those who've contributed to social justice and senior rights. The ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of the Maricopa County Courthouse. I chose a light blue dress, simple, like the life I now lived. When I stepped onto the stage, applause filled the room. Among the crowd, I saw Julian in the second row, his eyes glowing with pride I hadn't seen since he was a boy. I walked to the podium, my hands slightly trembling, but my voice steady. Thank you. But today, I'm not telling my story. I'm telling the story of every mother, every father, every grandparent who was deceived by those they trusted most. I paused, looking out at the faces. I once thought that when someone betrays you, the best revenge is silence. But I learned something else. When someone steals your trust, reclaim it with truth. No shouting, no hatred, just truth. Because truth holds a power no punishment ever could. Applause erupted, long and heartfelt. After the ceremony, light rain began to fall. Julian came up beside me, draping his jacket over my shoulders. Mom, he said softly, I've never seen you shine like this. I smiled, holding his hand. It's not because of the award, son. It's because you're here, like the old days. Only now you truly understand what honesty means. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my worn journal. I wrote the final line. A mother's greatest victory isn't winning in court. It's teaching her child the value of honesty. I closed the book, listening to the wind outside. On the table, a small candle flickered, casting a soft glow over the family photo. Theodore, me, and little Julian. 3 faces in one frame, bound by one truth. Love never dies. It just changes form. My life was no longer loud, rich, or grand, but it was full, in its own quiet, peaceful way. And if you're still here with me, listening, maybe sitting in your own quiet room tonight, I want to say this. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of my story. If you've ever faced injustice or betrayal within your own family, share your story in the comments below. I truly want to hear it, because maybe your voice today could help someone else find hope tomorrow. And if you believe, as I always have, that the truth will always find its way home, please like, subscribe, and stay for the next stories. I'll tell you about women, about mothers, about those who once fell but rose again through the light of justice and compassion. From Phoenix, Arizona, this is Rose Whitmore, and this is my truth.